Professor Millard, thank you for not only joining me here today, but for guiding me through my PhD. I am as grateful as I think you are aware.
A pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now let's do that again because I interrupted you. What did you say?
I said it was a pleasure, Frode. It's always been and it's been an interesting journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you've done since the PhD.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I actually started this with the PhD, as you know, and it has been substantially expanded. So yeah, let's go into it. So I'm going to show you two basic things that work in both the writing system, which is author, and the reading system, which is reader. To use escape to go in and out of full screen works in both, and it's a really important thing for me at least. This software is primarily written for myself as the number one user. I think it's a bit disingenuous for someone like me to pretend to do it for someone else. I know other people can. Of course, it has to be done, but this is a personal kind of a knowledge writing space thing. So being able to quickly click a button, top left button, in out of full screen is huge. And then to interact with things, it's primarily through the context menu, which is either control click or double tap on a trackpad. So there's a difference between selecting text and getting a menu. Here you can see I've selected the menu. I have the main context menu, and under that I have headings. So here you can also see that if I want to assign heading level 2 with keyboard shortcut, I can also do that. So that's relatively unique for this design. I don't know why that isn't done. So here you can see it's done. And now I'm doing the control key or context menu, whatever we want to call it, without selecting text. It's a very different menu.
Yeah.
So it's really, this is something that my programmers are going mad because I keep changing what's in there. I want it to be the absolute minimum in there, so it's not clutter. The last
Very,
thing,
very often they're overwhelming, I think.
yeah, it is. And the flow and the shape of it, I think, is really important to work on. The last thing we threw away last night is cuttings because we now have the lower left in the screen. I'll show you them later, but they don't need to be in the context menu. So the main part of the presentation now will be going through author, writing, AI and links, and mapping, and then a little bit of reader, and of course, a brief bit on export at the end, because a key thing is dealing with citations and how it's exported. But pleasure and comfort comes really high up on my agenda. So you can specify what color sets suit you. There's a few of them. And I think it's kind of surprising actually what people like. To access these, there's a button or clickable thing, bottom right, that says settings.
So presumably they're quite important for accessibility as well.
Yes, absolutely. And in Reader, even more so to an extent, which I look forward to showing you very, very much. So here you can see in the settings, you can choose the font, but you cannot choose font while you're writing, as in you can't make one word different font from another. There has to be a semantic value to making that choice.
Yeah.
So you can kind of set it once. And this is where you set the theme, we call it. Also the column width, because you can actually write in the margins, which we're not going to go into today. And then there's cuttings, like I mentioned, lower left. Normally, if you cut things, Command X, and then you cut another one, you have lost the previous. So if you click on cuttings, lower left, here's everything you cut that you have not pasted. I don't find myself using it that much, but I find it reduces a little bit of stress because I'm not worried about losing something by accident.
Yeah.
Paragraph focus is, as in other software, fades everything else except for the paragraph you're on if you're really struggling with the paragraph and need that space. Of course, it carries across to different themes. To access it, you have to go to the View menu and choose Focus or Command /. I'm a keyboard shortcut person, not everybody is. We try to balance it. And then mark, fade, and outline. It sounds like three people. It almost is. So the first thing was mark. And you can see I'm using Samuel Pepys' diary here instead of my own. It's a bit more exciting. So a bit is highlighted or marked, and to mark it, you, as most things, use the context menu, or you do command single quote, which is really quite convenient actually. And boom, there it is. A really important thing is when you go into an outline view, fold it into an outline, anything that is marked appears.
Hmm.
A new
So
thing that,
the other things there are the headings, presumably.
correct, yes. A new thing we're working on now that I didn't completely get ready for today for you is in the settings, you can actually specify what, in addition to headings, will show up. It
Right.
can include things like names, citations. So however you work, whatever helps you get an overview of your document is what will appear. You choose it yourself. Boom. Yeah, you can see that here. Some of it's working, it's not perfect yet. So, but even you can choose to have bold text appear.
Yeah.
Now, the opposite of marking text is fading text, which is quite controversial. I like it for listy things. But the key is, first of all, you add it in the similar way, but instead of command quote, you do command shift, meaning it's command double quote. And for some reason, for me, that works. A lot of the keyboard shortcuts I forget, but that one kind of works. And if you do something like this, you have a long bullet list. Of course, a bullet list is very scannable, but it takes up a lot of space. All that stuff at the bottom, I gain by having it as a paragraph. So I could even take away the numbers just like this. So now it becomes much more skimmable.
And that reduction of the bullet list to the paragraph, how automatic is that? How do you
Completely
set?
manual.
Right.
So here's the thing. When you export, and I've grayed out everything we're not talking about now, you can choose to have the marked text stay orange and bold, or be just bold, or
Yeah.
be plain text, or deleted, so you can use it for notes. Same for faded text. However, what we are trying to do is to make it automatically be a bullet list on export.
Okay.
So the other way around from what you saw.
So what's your use case for the faded text then? How do you use it?
I don't know yet. I find that right now for the work we're doing with Sloan, it's a lot of repeating of lists.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to reinvent publish and subscribe or Ted Nelson's, what's it called again? Transclusions.
Mm.
But I can't get the infrastructure for that. So the closest I can do is when I repeat a list, I don't want to take too much space.
Yeah.
But it really, really is important that when you export it, it doesn't have to look like this.
Hmm.
But it should go in the metadata. So if the user would like to read it like this, they should be able to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a very interesting approach to look at interactions within the document. You don't tend to see that very much. You get sort of heading folding. That's fairly common. But kind of other kind of manipulations of the text, that's not very common. So it's interesting to see you experiment with that, I think. Um, See what's effective.
Yeah, thank you. Because I mean, the reason I'm so excited to show you is because I appreciate you intellectually as a friend, everything. As I've told everybody, you understand the history of hypertext better than anybody I met. But not just historically ABC, but what the ideas are.
Hmm.
And as an eminent professor, you also understand the constraints of academia.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. So, we can't do funny looking documents for academia yet. So I want people to be able to do rich things to help them think and see while writing, package it in an academic way, but then also to be able to extract it out again if later, as you may have noticed from my thesis. Yeah, here's an example of the options when you export.
Yeah.
Here's just showing a little bit of combination of both, which may or may not be the aesthetic people want, but it's possible. So let's look a little bit about the hype of the day, AI, and then we'll go to briefly the journal and linking. So surprise, surprise, AI works in the same way, context menu. So in this example, I selected everything, did a context menu, and now I have a Spark. This is what's going on here. This is to help people think, and it's based on who they are. So under the user, when you write who you are, it'll take that into account and slightly change the result. So here, for example, I said I'm a high school student. I don't speak English very well. So then it decided, based on the other prompt, to describe what some of the terminology is.
Okay, that's interesting. So is the Spark thing literally saying, based on what you know about me, represent the text to me in some way that would be useful?
Yes, but AI is very non-deterministic in the sense that you ask the same thing and then you get three different formatted replies. The user in settings can really tweak the prompt as
Yeah.
well as information about themselves. I'm fully aware that under you, I studied computer science. Very different fields will need very different kinds of prompts and information, so all of that can be tweaked by the user.
Right.
This is the interface. In settings, there's a tab. You can edit each one of these. You can also edit the proofread one separately because people will have different degrees of what proofreading they need
Yep.
and so on. This is what it looks like editing. The type is a bit small. That's been criticized. I've decided probably not to fix it. You probably want to write it as a proper document and then paste it in because it's too important. So in a dialogue like this, it's always going to be a bit suboptimal, but we'll see. And as you can see at the bottom there, customize based on information and user about you. You have a choice to enable that or not, because maybe sometimes you want to have a neutral answer. The journal is just a keyboard shortcut. I chose Command Option J because Option is next to the Command key. And you do that and you have your journal. It's a normal author document, hidden away so it doesn't get deleted accidentally, and always accessible with a keyboard shortcut. I happen to use it as a bit of a journal. You can use it for whatever, of course, notes, whatever you want. But the really key thing is, as I keep writing, very often it's too much and I would have put it in another document.
Yeah.
So, you know what to do, links, right? So we recently have introduced links to document. This is so obvious and simple. I don't understand why all software doesn't have it. Command Shift D is quite easy to remember, plus Control click, and there it is. Open dialog, find the thing, and it appears underlined like any normal link. Click on it, there it is in case it's small on the screen. Click on it, you get unlink or open. So these are standard system affordances, which I try to use as much as possible, or interface elements. Click on it, opens a document, that's it.
So the way you use the journal, so is the journal a file that you nominate, or is it something that's held internally for author, and therefore it's always the same thing?
You do actually have more than one. I'll show you live actually. We have I have journal ideas, research notes, and master map. They are all normal. Oh, hang on, I lost you. They're all normal author documents.
Yeah.
By default, they're in a specific quote unquote secret location, but you can go into settings and put it somewhere else.
Yeah. Got you. Okay. So
But
that makes sense. So you've got a kind of multiple different types of journal that you could potentially use.
yeah, and also, so here's mine live. So if I go up to the beginning, I have archives from previous years. I choose to do it per year. Yeah, sometimes we get system weird little things where they won't always open, but I can still see where they are here, so that
Yeah.
helps, right? So it is the point is to give you something that has all the affordances you're used to.
Yeah.
It just happens to be instantly accessible.
So this starts to build a kind of hypertext across your personal file system, right?
This has become my desktop,
Yeah.
and once we get to map, you'll see even more why.
And of course, the files that you are linking to, presumably they can also link to other files and so on.
Yes. Normally, I would link to an author document. However, I've started recently, like the presentation I'm showing you today. Let me see here. See how efficient I can. Okay, these are the fake ones I pasted on the bottom, right? Present author and reader to Dave Millard. Click here. This is a link to the Keynote file. Oh, okay, I have to restart or something, but yes, it can be to anything. It also means that, yeah, it means that images too. I have to admit, author gets a bit heavy with many images, so I tend to just put them in a folder and link to them if I want to see them later.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a bit embarrassing that they didn't all open, but that's a system thing. The environment we have to deal with.
That's the way demos go, right?
Yeah, it is. Also worth saying is the way. No, I'll get to it later. Don't want to ruin it. Okay, so that was that. Now we get to the map. And the map is, you could, well, first we define you, Dave Millard. So I write a little bit about you. And then importantly, I indicate that you are a person. That's it. Then I click on map at the bottom or Command M. And here you can already see our relationship because I wrote that you were my professor. That's why we have those lines. So bottom left, I have show. So if I hide and show all the people, they're all selected when they come back. So that means I can do layout based on the categories.
Yeah.
Organizing stuff in these things is a big deal.
So how do you use this view? So you talked about the journal. You're presumably, are you recording these kinds of things in your journal and using it for that, or is it more that you're doing it within a particular document to capture a set of ideas? Or
Look at this. This tells you half of it. I am now adding a document to the map, not writing space. I then click open and I use AI to summarize that document.
yeah,
This is a little laborious, but you'll see why. So it's summarizing it, select all, copy, close the document, and in the definition, I paste that.
yeah,
So that is the beginning of the kind of keywords that tell me what's happening is useful. For me personally, it's very experimental. It's also working to make this work be exported via JSON to go to our virtual reality environment.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you don't show the relationships unless you click on the nodes. What was your thinking there?
I can, in a very brief second, actually show you that because I did a presentation on that on Monday in our
Mhm.
in our meeting. So when you select, it gets messy. I mean, if you show everything, it gets messy. That's what
Yeah.
I was trying to say.
If you select multiple nodes, will it highlight the relationships between all of those nodes, or does it just do the first one you select? Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So that's why you can do things like AI and XR, see what they
And
point to.
and what do the highlighted nodes mean? The ones that have a box around them.
The highlighted means that AI, this is what it includes, right?
Yeah.
So this one here then will have AI in it. So these are the keywords. All the bold ones refer to something that is in the space.
Mhm. And does it identify those for you, or are those things you select as you're writing?
That's how I cheated by so let's go to, let's say, posture and XR. So I open it. Oh, what is going on? It worked on the, right. So all I do is I do ask AI summarize.
Yeah.
Of course, AI is going to be very slow today because it's a demo.
Yeah.
We are experimenting with local LLMs, but we haven't figured out what to use yet because a lot of it is, that's a lot. A lot of it's just getting some keywords out. So I close this and you see anything bold is on the, and that's what we use. So
Yeah.
now I can see, for instance, I use this space. Right now it's a mess because I've been going through, getting ready for these demo things. But for instance, I tend to have my company top right,
Yeah.
to do with author and reader. Team is a heading. You see, if you look at concepts here, these are all the concepts defined in this document. When I export, I don't want the heading exported, for instance. So that's why it's really important that they don't just, for instance, legends, Doug and Vint and so on, right? This is a label heading. It doesn't have, it's not a proper defined concept.
Got you. So it's like a way of annotating the space, basically.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So it's a workspace. So now I'm on a 14-inch laptop. That's why you can see me moving around like this.
Hmm.
We did have different scaling mechanisms, but I decided that having the default basically be a 27-inch seems to make sense because
Mhm.
that's a usable space. And then within here, it's a bit, yeah, it's okay to go up against the walls a little bit. But I really, really look forward to being able to click a button and have this in my headset.
Yeah.
And the big issue then becomes binding. Okay, since it's you, binding. It's a really important issue because in an XR system, well, okay, in a normal academic world, we have a paper in a journal.
Hmm.
So the paper is bound in a journal. In an environment like this, whether XR or 2D, you have to choose. Do you want to see one paper or the journal, or all the papers of the journal? These are all tied together.
Yeah.
So being able to put things into a group and expanding them is becoming more and more vital and difficult.
Yeah.
So then we go over to Reader. We're way ahead of schedule, which is excellent despite our interesting discussion. So add to library. Let's say we go to ACM, we download this brilliant paper, save the PDF to the desktop, double click, and then we go library, move document to library. It finds the DOI on the first page,
Hmm.
sends it to Crossref, and makes metadata from it. So that's when it can, that's what it does.
That's great. Yeah. And the metadata was that's your visual meta on the end of the document?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then in the library, oh, this is something that came up yesterday and today. I'm very excited. Reader used to be just viewing a PDF, but now that we have the library, how do I tell people to use Command L? A bit ridiculous. So now, if you don't have a document open, the library opens automatically, like an open save dialog box.
Yeah. Okay.
And what we're adding now at the bottom here, it says add PDF to library. So just going to be a button that says add. Click on that, and whatever PDF you choose will be added to the library.
So what is the library? Is the library a document of links, or is it a folder somewhere with PDFs in it, or
It's a
what's the conceptualization of the library?
it is a folder of documents. It cannot support PDFs that are not here yet. A
Hmm.
book cannot go into it. That's something that I'm hoping to change. The idea is basically it's a very, very slim reference manager.
Yeah.
And we're
Okay.
hoping that more metadata, useful things can happen here and then go in XR.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the arrow to the add PDF. So we also have settings in the same place now, which is nice, consistent. And then if you hide documents that you want to have available for search but not to view, you click on that one, which is similar to cuttings. Right, so in Reader for reading, the focus view is at the bottom when you don't select text or shift space. It takes the document, sends it off to ChatGPT. It actually takes quite a while. I cheated on that one. It's a slide. We're trying to improve that, but it basically does this. Now,
Okay.
this is a prompt that the user can control too. So if they have specific requirements for how it should appear, they can use that. And what is new also this week, thank you again, Dave, for making this a deadline, is in Reader now, we have the same themes as we have in Author
Right.
when you're in Focus. So you can change it to this, or to this,
Yeah.
to this. And actually, let me go back. Also, you can change the size of this and the font. So this is a really big usability thing for people who have whatever visual things. No images come across, unfortunately, but it deals with ligatures. It deals with weird columns of text in PDFs. It does a really pretty good job.
Yeah.
So that's very
And the
exciting.
default prompt in here is, are you just reformatting or are you doing any summarization?
No summarization. This is just a focused reading mode.
Yeah.
But you can do, I'm not sure if this is actually in, so let's do,
So okay. So thinking of it as a focused reading mode, a sort of intelligent way of reformatting the text.
yeah,
Okay.
that's all it does.
Yeah.
So when it comes to summarization and stuff, it's really, really important for us that the system doesn't do the work for the user, but helps the user.
Yeah.
So we have a command called AI overview, which gives a one sentence summary. Why not?
Mhm.
But the key is key terms. This is also going to be influenced by who you are,
Yeah.
right? So here it lists the important people in the document, timeline, and all that stuff. The point of this came up when there was a some kind of a neuro article, brain thing, a few months ago. People were sending around, and there were a few terms I didn't understand,
Mhm.
acronyms. I looked them up online, and they made no sense. They referred to other things. But
Yeah.
when I ran this, it explained it perfectly.
Yeah.
So it
That's good.
really is an assistant rather than a doing it for you.
And some of that information, so things like Ben's biography that's in there, that's not in this paper, right? So it is there. It's on the right hand side. So that's included in the paper.
Yeah, and it's the prompt. Let me just find it. Focus, not the focus prompt. The Ask AI prompt for AI overview is here. Okay, please list all. Explain who they are based on what is in this text. Do not use your prior knowledge.
Gotcha. Okay.
Good.
And what about the timeline? Because that's an interesting thing to come out in that review. So
Yeah,
if you scroll down, you got this kind of key timeline. Is that coming from the biography as well?
it's coming from whatever dates it finds,
Got you. Okay.
which is really quite fascinating at times because it parses it really, really well.
And is it so are those dates coming from the references list?
They're coming from whatever it finds. If there is something, here you can see it says the founding director, right?
Yeah.
Let's see here. What year was that? 1983. Did it catch that? Yeah, I see. That didn't catch that.
83 is at the top.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course it is right here. It did catch that. Very good, right? So look at how it's formatted here. Founding director in brackets of blah blah blah, right? And it makes it a coherent line item.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is fascinating. I'd be really interested to look at how it is doing this for different types of papers and where those things are coming from. I think that I think it's really useful because I think when you're encountering papers for the first time, um, papers have different ways of organizing their knowledge, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
chronology isn't always one of them. I mean, sometimes it is. If you're reading a review paper, they might have picked the chronological order of things, but normally things are done on a much more conceptual basis or thematic basis. So I think something that kind of gives you that alternative perspective and dynamically pulls out those key dates and presents them to you is a really interesting idea. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think that AI has to be used, and it has to be used in intelligent ways. So, in since, okay, so, oh no, it was actually a week ago, but no, no, hang on, we can use that. Okay, so there's one slide on here. I wish you were there on Mondays more often. I know you're busy, but when we're looking at citations, so this is for WebXR work, but it's conceptually the same, obviously. All pieces of citation, let's say citation is a thing in space for the sake of argument, right? Like a PDF for all contents. It has to know what it is. Otherwise, it's not a citation.
Mm.
Extracted keywords can be relatively manual. It could be normal traditional coding or even listing in keyword sections. This is where it gets more analytical, to use an LLM for it. Topics don't necessarily have to appear in the paper, it can be inferred. Names may or may not be correct. Timeline data, as you saw, usually pretty damn good, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't do a nuclear reactor based on it. Right? It's the kind of thing the user has to be aware is done with best effort kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we get to full text, which usually is fine, but it may not parse every single one correct. And finally, we have this one, which bizarrely enough comes from our good friend Mark Anderson, who's quite an AI skeptic, because he said something similar to you. He would very much like to have things analyzed based on what he knows. So one thing we've talked about is Mark writes a glossary. The
Mm.
glossary goes into Reader and into the prompt. When Reader does an AI analysis of a paper, if that paper presents a different definition, substantially different, highlight it.
Right. Okay.
Right. So that's we're not trying to make it think, we're trying to make it match things for you.
Yeah. That's also very nice. You're drawing the user's attention towards those kinds of important differences. Um, yeah, that's a very nice use of AI, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I hope we can work more on this together because obviously we can't ignore AI and obviously we can't say it's the best thing in the world. So it's important to have a more mature
Well,
discussion.
well, I think we're in that stage, aren't we, of exploring what works, right? And we all know we can do summarization, but the applications of summarization are a little bit limited. So actually using it to scaffold your thinking about a paper or to prompt you or to give you a kind of a suggestion of an alternative way of thinking about a piece of work, I think those are really interesting. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, we do a related thing with our meetings, our Monday meetings in the Future Text Lab. Like this is last Monday. Here is a pretty good summary, but then we have many categories below.
yeah,
Summary per person, and we have a speaker summary. Tries to figure out who the main speaker was, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then we get down to topics discussed, which is hugely valuable. Also, smaller topics,
yeah.
interesting anecdotes, and it gets it right, right?
That's lovely. Yeah.
I mean, like, and this means this is now searchable. All our corpus, like, you know,
Mm.
what did Ken Perlin say about a Java thing? Boom, it is now findable. It even includes concept introduced, which is really weird. So we can see for the first time we start talking about the cube metaphor for XR. Did we talk about knowledge object? Blah, blah, blah. Whether we invented it or not doesn't matter. It's when it's introduced in this system.
Yeah.
And then it goes down to names. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're definitely on the same page on that one. So we also have a find command, of course. And it's pretty cool, I think, because you can select text when you're reading PDF to find in document, and it does this.
Hmm.
Kind of ugly because PDFs are bad parsed. We can obviously try to improve that. And also you can do find in library. So it
Right.
becomes implicit linking. So all of these are showing the word cognition. The yellow one just happens to be a document I haven't read yet, so it's actually irrelevant for find, but that's why it's there.
Okay.
And then we go, wow, we're really steaming ahead. Highlight and view highlight. So this is very much for Deanie because she really, really goes through underlines and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So we developed a list of the kind of things. So for
Yeah.
instance, this is clearly important in it. Over here, I don't know what that is. So you see the keyboard shortcut slash is actually the same as the question mark key. So even though it's PDF and the highlighting isn't flawless, it goes a little bit over, it means that you can start building a shape of how you see it when you're reading. You can also, without selecting, because of course there's color for one thing, but when you context menu without selecting text,
Mm.
you can choose to view all the, it's not, that word annotation has changed. It's now called headings. Excuse me, highlights, sorry.
Yeah.
Choose all the highlights or just what's great, disagree, whatever.
Yeah.
Here's all or both. Here's just one.
Yeah. So it's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting decision, rather, to make those highlights semantic rather than formatting, because highlights are normally the semantics are totally implicit, and what you're doing is you're giving people that chance. So, what was behind your thinking with that?
Um, just going through my own settings here, there was actually a time where you could specify whether it should be by color or by meaning.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying. It's something worth highlighting, and I would like to also give people the opportunity to change and make those
Yeah.
for them because now our main intellectual focus, in addition to polish this, is of course WebXR.
Yeah.
And what we're dealing with there is, at least right now, it's annotated bibliography, which we'll get onto in a second. Highlighting in a document by itself has nothing to do with an annotated bibliography. But it is, I am a very lazy person information-wise, which is why I don't use a lot of paper. I don't like to write stuff and not have it accessible. So what we're working on is already what you highlight goes into the database of Reader. So that means that when you do a search, a find in the library, it goes through highlighted text, not full body text, but highlighted text. So it already knows what you've highlighted in different colors or different meanings. So what I'm hoping we can do is when you have your citation thing in space, you can see by the dots of colors or something what you have annotated, so you can see if you really liked it or had these feelings or all of that stuff.
So, I mean, looking at that list, you've got highlight at the bottom. So presumably that's a sort of a catch-all for
That's
to
just, yeah,
just want to
sorry,
frame
sorry.
this as something that's interesting to pay attention. Yeah.
It's a hangover for using the word, the keyword shortcut H.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes it the most boring now.
I think it's an interesting one, and so it's not clear to me what the right decision is. Right? So you either give people a set of tools to do format highlighting with formatting, right? So you can pick a different type of pen, you can or highlight a bold, an italic, whatever it would be, different colors. You can do all of that kind of stuff. Call outs in line highlighting, all sorts of different options you could do. The problem with that is that you then don't give anyone any a kind of a scheme to guide their highlighting, right? So or to guide their annotation. So you're leaving it up to them to decide how they want to use those highlights and how they want to put them together, which is good in a way because it's super flexible, but also it can leave people a bit lost. They've got all of these choices and they don't quite know what to do. Whereas I think the very best software leaves space for personalization, but also leads people. It kind of, it's not just giving you the tools and then leaving you alone. It's showing you what to do with the tool, right? It's kind of built into the design. It's sort of encouraging you and saying, these are useful things you can do with this system, and I'm going to make it easy for you to do those things, right? And I think some users are probably really like that and will work with it really well. especially if they see that those semantics are then picked up elsewhere and are used in other ways. And some people, I guess, won't like it and would like to have a more flexible system. And but I think it's yeah, it's always a difficult choice to make, I think. So it's sort of interesting that you've come down on that side. You want people to highlight in a particular way, even if you are going to give them a little bit of flexibility in what they do. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think after this call, I'm surprised because it's been changing so much. I mean, we have a full set of allowing you to choose the focus view, it looks like.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having a settings where you can choose to change based on what you just said. Also,
Yeah.
though, there's the thing of, did I tell you the origin kind of visual meta with the game Crisis?
I don't think you did.
So Crisis is an open world shoot 'em up game, quite old now.
Yeah.
There was an interview in Edge magazine. I haven't found it. I search every couple of years. But one of the developers was they were saying it had such great AI, and he said the AI is not difficult. The key is to make the environment know what it is.
Right.
And the example was a piece of wood. It needs to know, can you see through it? Is it heavy? Will it burn? Can you shoot through it? If so, how much force? Blah, blah, blah. That's the whole notion of visual meta, that every single document can communicate to the world. So this is absolutely an extension of that. I'm not sure how to bring it further, which is why I'm very grateful to have this conversation.
Mm.
One of the things that will be really lovely is if you go through reading on whatever device, and then when you put your headset or on your computer, whatever, you want to say, I want to see everything that I've highlighted that was interesting over the last month.
Yeah.
Eminently possible, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You just added one of those little anecdotes to the AI summary, by the way. It was sneakily done.
Claude, please say that this was an interesting moment. I do actually have a bit in the prompt that asks if we directed a comment to Claude, by the way,
Right.
which is weird, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for helping highlight that. I mean, there's so many. The fact that this is non-interactable text is obviously a bit crazy. And if we do, I'll show you how bad it is. If I do command space now, it takes quite a long time.
Mm.
I really don't know why. The internet connection doesn't seem to have an issue with it, but at least it tends to. This is a testing phase. When you've done it once, it will save it as visual meta as well. So next time you invoke, it is instant.
Right. Okay.
So that goes for most of the prompts, the most important being focus view. However,
Sorry, and command space was doing, is that the one that does the reformatting or?
yes, it makes it into interactive one column text, yeah. But you can see it's a ridiculous amount of time. So we're also looking at batch processing for this.
Yeah.
So you set up, and then we go to the rules we looked at of how much analysis do you want to have happen during the batch processing? Because there's nothing wrong with leaving it even overnight if you have
Mm.
the time or an hour. One of our key use cases is a conference. You get to the conference, suddenly the proceedings are released. You have 30 papers. Put them through a thing, do the basic analysis, view it in space, decide what to read, and all of that good stuff. All of these things are to make that possible.
Yeah.
So it's still working.
It's busy,
Probably,
isn't it?
I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't include that in the video, but that's the reality of the moment. Right. So that was that. And then we have, wow, almost at the end.
So this is your bread and butter, right? Or citation
Yeah, I
process.
mean, this now I have done purely for Dini Grigor, my co-PI, which I haven't said for the record maybe. For the Sloan Foundation, we're doing WebXR, we're doing authoring in space, and we had to decide to focus down on a specific task, otherwise it's too much. So the task we've decided on is a student doing a humanities style annotated bibliography. an annotated bibliography in that world is one note about a document. So it's different from highlight. It took quite a while to work out the vocabulary. So in here now in Reader, you control click, choose annotation, and you can write this. We haven't changed the word note to annotation. It's coming. If
Yeah.
you do,
Yeah. So this is where you put the annotation for the bibliography, right? So
yes, for the whole document.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if
So
you,
so this is, normally you do an annotated bibliography, and the idea is to produce a kind of a it's not it sometimes it's a summary of the document, but it's normally a bit more pointed than that. It's more like, why is this document relevant to the task for which I'm putting together the annotated bibliography?
yeah. By
Right.
the way, this suddenly now tried to do a AI. The AI wasn't reachable, so it did it through manual, and it's just a mess. It just happened to pop in when you were talking. Right.
Just shows you, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay.
So here we have, this is live. So here we are, and I write this, sorry, this is what I think. In the different styles, as you say, click save. If I now click anywhere else, oops, without selecting text and do annotation again, it's the same dialogue,
Yeah.
as you know, but just for the record that is, just gonna screenshot this for myself. So this one now, I don't know if it has visual meta yet, but isn't it fun going through quickly like this?
Hmm.
Wow, it's quite a document. Okay, that's crazy. Right, okay, but the thing is, yeah, okay, it's got some information, clearly not enough. It's not something I was going to cite, but if I now do copy to cite, and this was supposed to work by now, but it doesn't. But if I now paste it,
Yeah.
oh, it did work actually. So,
Okay.
so this is the citation information on top,
Yep.
and this is what I think underneath.
Yeah.
When I click on this citation, I have this annotated bibliography because there was something in the annotate field. The annotate field is part of BibTeX according to Mark, which is all I need to know to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is the only external information used here. Note, quote, and abstract should have been from the publisher or author.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? So I have this one. Now we can choose to have it just appear as a normal citation, but this extra option appear just when you paste it in this way. So this is what I showed you live. So now we go back to author, paste citation. So here's the earlier one that I did.
Yeah.
It's really quite exciting to have this happen. Because it should mean that you can, I remember, hang on, I'll tell you in a second, but on the export, as I think you know, you do Command-Shift-E. One of the new things is you can click AI Suggest to write an abstract keyword, concept, and all of that. You have all these options. And then save it on the desktop. Here's the document. It's not my real thesis, it's just the short version. Does the references and all of that for you.
Yeah.
And we're done. Because from that document, you can now copy a citation back to other things.
So a couple of questions. So when you're doing the paste a citation, you get the annotation. The annotation that's dropped in, is that part of that citation, or is it literally just cut and paste into the document so you can edit it and change it? How is it? Is it linked in, or is it there a separate thing?
I'll show you. So here is the annotation, right?
Yep.
We're now going to go metadata, copy using BibTeX formatting, and then I do Command-Shift-C. It could be Command-C, I'll probably change it. And then I'll just go to plain text, delete, and well, okay, that's how it puts it here. If I had it in something it could read BibTeX,
Yeah.
it would. But okay, so to answer your question straight, then I'm sorry, I forgot it was simplified. It adds a line to the BibTeX called annotate, a field, I mean.
Yeah. But when you paste it, so you get the citation and then the annotation's put underneath. There you go. So is that annotation linked in? So can I edit it in the document and change what it says? Or is it that field that's always shown? So I have to edit the field in order to update it. So,
You have to edit the field.
okay, so it's part of the citation
Yeah,
effectively.
thank you. Yes, now I understand. That is hugely significant and hugely important because the idea is that an annotated bibliography thing like this, just want to make sure I can see you again, is a knowledge object.
Yeah.
If I click on it now and I edit in the dialog, it does reflect here.
Yeah.
It also means I can click on it, copy, go somewhere else and paste it as a note, and even into another document.
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting challenges, and I guess you get this. So one of the comments I was going to say is one of the obviously I've been following this for quite a few years now, and it's been interesting to watch you move from an intra-document system to an inter-document system, right? So things like bringing in the library, bringing in the idea of a journal, bringing in these kind of additional pieces. And that kind of changes the way in which you conceptualize the tool and that you think about the functions that it has. Um, One of the interesting things about the annotation field is that when you're doing an annotated bibliography, you're doing it typically for a purpose, right? So what's interesting is that if you are certainly if you're a student and you're working on a dissertation or a PhD, even a PhD thesis, very often you only have one project, right? So your annotated bibliography, you'll have one annotated bibliography because you have one thing you're interested in. So you may be drawing on a paper because it's relevant for one particular reason, right? If you go on to have an academic career, you now no longer have one context. You'll have different contexts for different projects, for example. So with your project, when you're doing, essentially looking at knowledge writing and management in XR environments. So you might bring in a paper to an annotated bibliography in that space. And the thing that's interesting about that paper to you is completely different than a different project where you first encountered that paper, sorry, where there was some other aspect to the paper that was relevant, right? So I think as you move from looking at single documents to multi-document, and again, as you kind of increase the time span and you move from kind of like single instance or single project to kind of over time, how do you manage this over a career, for example, right?
Yeah.
You'll start getting these additional problems will come up or challenges that will come up,
Opportunities.
opportunities that will come up as way to deal with them. Yeah. So it's interesting to see you starting to tackle some of those problems and encounter them and see the solutions that you've started to put in. I think it's really good to see.
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting problem. And Vint Cerf was obviously been very supportive of this. He is a bit provocative with XR, VR. He says it's basically more screens. He's
Yeah,
partly joking, but he is obviously right to an extent because
yeah,
a lot of the problems we need to solve in XR we can solve in 2D first. And the kind of multi-dimensional, I mean, there's such a throwaway sentence, everything's connected. What does that mean? Right? Not
mm,
if you don't have the metadata. Oh, yeah, so this is the thing. Wendy Hall, who introduced me to the PhD, got me started and gave me my scholarship, for which I'm grateful. She said in one of the earliest sessions we talked, she says she doesn't have time for writing anymore. She just wants to be able to put things together,
mm,
like a tweet and stuff. Um, that is very much part of what this is, right? We
yeah,
shouldn't have to deal with dead text. We should deal with knowledge objects.
yeah,
We're trying to figure out what that means.
yeah, yeah. And I think you've got the 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 classic problem that hypertext identified really early on was the lost in hypertext problem, right? Which is the fact that you have yes, everything is connected, but actually that's not that helpful because it just becomes a mess. It's a forest. So one of the things that happens if you go and look at a lot of sort of what you might call modern hypertext systems or personal note-taking applications that have graph views is that they can become really overwhelming, right? So one of the very first things that I tend to do when I'm using those systems is I will add in some semantic rules about what's the the degrees of separation I'm interested in showing, or are there particular tags on the nodes that I can use to change the color of the nodes to just to start taking this mess and start to make it into something that's actually practical and useful, right? And again, that's clearly something that you're working with all the time in terms of how do I visualize these connections? How do I display differences between nodes? How do I access this information and edit it? Um, yeah, so I think you're coming up against some of those classic issues as well.
I'm supposed to have a meeting now. I'm just going to email them saying I'm a bit late. So don't think I got bored with our dialogue. I know you're busy too. It just,
That's all right. We should probably wrap up soon anyway. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, overrunning. It's our potential host for the future of text this year. So
Yeah.
it has to be done in the right
We'll,
way.
we'll, we'll finish up. We'll finish up quick so you can go and secure your venue. That's it.
So,
Yeah.
um, okay, I'll throw you a problem. I have been very, very stressed with the XR project, but intellectually stressed the way we should when we care about our work.
Yeah.
And one of the stressful things is the overwhelming potential when everything you see can be interactive.
Yeah.
So one of the things we managed to do is to cut a hard line between context and manuscript.
Yeah.
Manuscript, I just mean a thing you are writing on Notepad, whatever, that
Yeah.
isn't published yet. That's all I mean.
Yeah.
So that's separate from the world. You can take some from the world, put it in. Of course you can. That's basically authoring. So we've decided that the manuscript will be in the shape of a cube. The first work product, as you know, is an annotated bibliography.
Yeah.
So now we have to think of what does that mean? What do the different sides mean?
Yeah.
And also the issue of binding. If this is one paper
Yeah.
and we have 30 in, how do we stack them? And finally, if we want to write hypercard hypertextually, like nodes, how does that fit? How do you want to do that? Do you have any thoughts or dreams about this?
Mm. So actually, I was focusing on the very first thing you said rather than the particular thing, which was being overwhelmed by the possibility space, if you like. I just thought of something that we teach our games design students, uh, which is about game mechanics, or if you like, interactions within games, and it's about complexity and depth. So one of the problems you get with games is that people want depth in games. They want something that which is they can get stuck into, but they don't necessarily want complexity because complexity is confusing and difficult, right? So if you try and increase the depth of your game by adding new stuff, what you do is you're saying I'll start off with having I'll have a jump mechanism, and then I'll have shooting, and then I'll have collection, and I'll have all this stuff, right? What ends up happening is that you end up building the complexity until the game gets so complicated that no one can play it. It's overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So the way that you build depth is that what you do is every time you add a mechanic, you think about instead of adding loads of mechanics, every time you add one, you say, how does this interact with all the mechanics that are already in the game, right?
Yep.
So an example of that would be, in Mario, you might have, okay, I've got jumping, and now I'm going to have collectibles. So how do collectibles interact with jumping? Well, I can jump and bang my head on the top of a platform and I get a new collectible, right? I'm going to add monsters, right? So how does monsters interact with collectibles? Well, maybe they drop collectibles. How do they interact with jumping? Maybe I can jump on top of the monster to defeat the monster, right? So what you're doing is you're saying, I'm adding I'm adding a certain amount of mechanics. So for general software, you might think of that as functionality, but I'm getting exponential depth because every time I add a thing, I don't get one extra layer of power,
Yeah.
right? I get a whole dimension across everything that I've already done. And I think that might be a way of dealing with the complexity in XR spaces. So what you do is instead of adding new things in isolation, you kind of when you add something, you think how, you always ask yourself, how does this interact with all the things I've already got in here? And I think very quickly you'll build up a powerful interaction space with relatively few concepts or mechanisms. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but we're not really even there yet
Right.
because there. I'll show you a single slide from hang on, that's not where I wanted to go. But there we go.
So if I was to go to your cube metaphor, so you're saying that the what a cube represents an actual, is that a document in the space that you're looking at?
Kind of. I'm just showing you some X's of what we're not doing.
Right.
One of the original things was to have different workspaces like shelves in the space you can move about. We're not
Yeah.
doing that. So we have hand menus, not
Yeah.
just for gestures, but you can point your fingers and that stuff.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yep. Also, your wrists are really useful. Left wrist taps for the world, but if you tap on your right wrist, this cube appears and hides.
Right.
Because these are some of the interface options.
Yeah.
All your fingers, HUD glasses, floating control panel, toolbed, gestures, physical table, gloves, gadgets, cube, all of these things. It's really quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then this is where I show, because people don't know like you do, even a normal knowledge graph is a lot of, just get past those, complexity. So yeah, this is just the glossary that you know already. So the complexity of the environment are massive.
But okay. But so I suppose what I'm trying to suggest to you is that I think you have to at the moment there's no right answers, right? So you take the kind of you take the idea that you have, so you take your cube idea. So what is your cube idea? So is that to represent concepts in the space as cubes, which gives you then multiple surfaces to play with in terms of
No.
presenting them, or
It's okay. I'll get to that in a second. I just wonder how this screen shows the environment, right? So we jump ahead to the cube. So it's partly linear versus spatial.
yeah.
Cube is what you're adding things into.
So it's the space.
No, it is a cube in front of you. The way I look at it is like you take a notebook out of your jacket pocket.
Yeah, so a working space. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. It's exactly right. Yes,
We
100%.
sort of talked about this, right? We said that one of the problems in XR environments is that there's no application scope. So on a desktop, we're very used to the idea of windows.
Yeah.
And if I'm running, I don't know, if I'm running a note system over here and my email system over here, I cut and paste from one into the other, or I can drag from one into the other, but they are their own domains, right? And one of the problems in XR space is that we don't have a metaphor for that yet,
Yeah.
right? And you want to be able to mix things together, and how do we do that? So this is clearly one way, right? You say, yeah, I have a space, a working space, and each working space might have its own content and also possibly its own behavior.
Yes. And even on top of that, okay, so with the cube, let's say you grab something on the cube like Wendy would, and it becomes, let's say you grab an annotated bibliography piece, put it on, just like you saw an author, it's a line. Grab another one, you can reorganize them. That's great. But then on the different sides of your authoring cube, you may want to see just authors or a timeline or whatever, right? So that's quite fun. But then it's also, of course, interesting. How do you unfold the cube if you want to? So
Hmm.
you can see different aspects at the same time. You may also want that cube to be massive, so you're actually inside it,
Yep.
right? And additionally, once you're done authoring this cube, it then becomes a work product that others will use. So instead of seeing tiny little things in space, then they become what you said.
Yeah.
Each little knowledge object is a full cube.
Thing. Yeah.
So conceptually, this is all fun, but it becomes really, really complicated when you think of connecting. For instance, you click on a web link on a computer, you either change what you're viewing or you do command click so it's on the side. Here you have to decide if you follow a connection in the cube, do you open that thing into the space or do you change the space for that to be open?
Mm.
And these are fun things. It's just that to do exactly what you said, because I think you're absolutely right, and it's an insight I will be thinking about a lot. We have to make sure that the right kind of interactions for the right kinds of things, which is why it's so good to have separated the cube from the space, right? So
Mm.
if you're using your hands with the cube, you don't suddenly use a menu over there. That's for the space, because
Yeah,
it's like separating an email space from another space. We have to start doing that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, I'm not sure there's right answer, right? There's just different approaches. So you can imagine that if I select something in a cube, and I follow that link, what I actually want to happen is and again, it would be like me being in a Word document and clicking on a link to a PowerPoint document, right? What would I expect to happen? I expect I expect PowerPoint to pop up with that PowerPoint in it, right? But conceptually, what is happening is my working space, which has all the semantics of Word, right? I'm now getting a new working space alongside it with a new object in it with all the semantics and behavior of PowerPoint, right? So I've got two different working spaces where I've got different affordances. And if you translate that into the XR space, you can imagine, almost like a what's the like a chamber that for hazardous material that scientists use or something. You reach into the chamber. It's like if I'm in that chamber and I'm manipulating objects in that chamber, there's a certain set of behavior that's scoped to that space. And if I follow a link to something that's of that thing, it appears in the chamber. If I follow a link to something which is of something else, right, then what happens is I get a new chamber, right, with that thing in. And as I move from one to the other, all of my affordances, all of my functionalities and behaviors change just from where my attention is, right? That's a really interesting idea.
There's
That
no
you,
such thing as intention in XR.
well, there is because you can look at where somebody's action is happening. So if
Not
I'm reaching in, this is why I'm thinking of the fume cabinet, right?
okay,
If I'm
okay,
reaching
okay.
into the space, my hands are in that space, you know what I'm doing, you know what I'm manipulating, right? If I'm selecting from afar, maybe it's different. So maybe what you need to think about is, are there are there kind of operations that are universal, a bit like cut and paste on the desktop, right? Where if my hands are outside of the space and I'm pointing at things, or so I might be able to select something or manipulate it, cut, copy, replicate, that kind of thing. Whereas when I go into the space, maybe I get different affordances. Um, and I think that there's nothing to say that that metaphor's the right metaphor, right? But it's an interesting one to explore. And I think that in the project you've got, you'd be better off, because as you said, there's multiple ways of doing it. You'd almost be better off picking something like that and just running with it and seeing where you go, right?
Are you busy 4 to 6 on Mondays?
Normally I am, unfortunately, but what are we doing next Monday? Uh,
So last Monday we had authoring, and it was really useful. Some amazing people, but we're now going to have a session on authoring the cube only,
yeah.
just what you talked about. Another
Yeah.
one will be on the environment. It won't be this coming Monday because Deanie can't make it.
Okay. So the problem I have is that basically, so my son plays football on a Monday night.
Oh,
So
cool.
we eat dinner early so he can go out, right? So
Yeah.
that's the problem, is it always clashes with that. So that's why I can never make it. Um, but I think you come up with this idea of the cube as a conceptualization is a really nice one. And you can also imagine the whole scale thing, like you were saying. You might want to back off so that the cubes themselves become conceptual spaces that you can manipulate, right? Or you could assemble new working spaces by putting them next to each other. Or you might want to zoom in. You might want to immerse yourself in that environment so the whole thing's around you and you're in that kind of space. Um, but
Oh,
but you're never going to get an interface metaphor that doesn't have downsides as well as upsides, right?
oh, that doesn't bother me. The key thing here is theater. This needs to inspire people. If
Yeah.
we do several things and they're inspirational, but actually not that useful, that's
Mm.
totally fine. You
But I
know.
think you need a what I like about the cube metaphor is it's a really strong hook that people will understand, and this is what I was just saying about building on it. You can now build on it. So when you start thinking about, well, I want to add this functionality in, you can say, right, well, how does that interact with our cube metaphor? What does it mean to do that? Right?
You're familiar with Ted Nelson's zigzag, right? No,
Yeah.
no, which is the one where you had like yellow little boxes and they go in a circle or all over? Is that
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
right? These
Yeah.
cubes should be able to be in that view as well.
So zigzag was this kind of, so that's an automated. So far we've been imagining that these cubes are manually positioned,
Yeah.
right? So what zigzag does is it allows you to navigate multiple dimensions of data at once and to switch the dimension of navigation as you go. Hence the zigzag, right? You're kind of zigzagging through the information space by saying, well, so if I want to go through these chronologically, and now I want to go through them by author, and that now I want to go through it by location, and you kind of, it kind of does all this kind of stuff. So I think what you just said is I want to have a mode where the layout of the cubes is automated based on some metadata field, right?
Yeah, I don't use the term automated, but that's certainly the correct term. It's more programmatic versus manual,
Yeah.
right? And to go, and this is why this is so crazy. You saw an author, I can instantly select all the people and make them go like that, right? That's really useful. But in a 3D environment,
Mm.
how do you do that? Right? You don't have a control click menu. Of course, you could have it sprouting up your hands or whatever, but to go from a normal timeline
Mm.
into a full-on zigzag environment, I'm not saying it's impossible, but to make this a not Wizard of Oz, a Fantasia, Mickey Mouse interaction, right?
Mm.
Where you do this and it becomes that, and now it's a
Yeah.
sculpture.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the I mean, as ever, it's the tangibility of the interactions that makes it so appealing, right? So I'm
Exactly.
really struck. You just went, I want to turn it. I want to move the dimensions with my hand, right? Um, and I think that's what makes this space appealing. It doesn't necessarily make it more functional, but it kind of makes it more pleasurable to use. And we talked about that a little bit as well.
Oh, and pleasure is important. Now, there's one other thing that has to be mentioned. You just reminded me, because when something more is more pleasurable, we interact. We invest more in it,
Yeah, yeah,
and we have less barriers. So it is, yeah. But here's the thing that happened when I was at Fabienne. Yeah, he's basically the coder now for this. He's in Brussels, French guy, brilliant guy. You met him. We were sitting in his living room, Emily, Edgar, the whole family, and he has a nice lounge table or whatever. And then he took some magazines and moved them a little bit. I found that so fascinating. Really, I think this is a really important thing because I didn't see them being messy.
mm,
I care about magazines in my room. So I realized that order is a decision.
mm,
He had decided they should be thus.
yeah.
Right? Most of the time, as we go through life, literally walking down the street, we don't make the energy to decide things should be thus.
No,
Because if we do, there's a load of it irritating us in the future,
we had
right?
that conversation about annotations, right? And about semantic versus formatted annotations. It's exactly this, right? It's exactly this. So, so if you're in the mode of walking down the street and you don't really care about it, then actually a preset group of semantic annotations is exactly what you want, right? It's like, don't give me too many choices. I, I, I'm kind of there's a term in psychology called rational ignorance, right? Where you kind of You decide that the cost of learning about something is greater than the reward of knowing about it, right? So you don't ever learn about it. A good example of that is combustion engines, or I guess these days electric motors. Right? Most people haven't got a clue how a combustion engine works or an electric motor, but we're quite happy to get in a car and use one. It's rational ignorance, right? We just need to know enough.
Yeah.
And your kind of annotations are doing that, right? It's like I give you a set of annotations, you can just use them, it's fine. But then sometimes you're in a different mode of thinking about it, and you really care and you want fine-grained control. And in those cases, the software um, starts to really grate on you, right? And be difficult. So, that's the tightrope you're walking. So in your annotation example, for the vast majority of people, it's going to be great saying, highlight something that's problematic, highlight something that I don't understand, highlight because it's like, okay, you've given me a basic schema to do this and I can use it to operate. But some people will want very specific things. So an example of that would be if I was doing a systematic coding of papers. So that's when you highlight things and you're saying this is a code, right? And you might want to have different colors for different dimensions of codes or different codes that you're putting in. Yeah. So an example would be recently I did a review of ethical strategies for designing mixed reality environments, right? Um, every time I came across an ethical strategy in a paper, I'd highlight it and I'd say, this is a strategy, right? This is a strategy. And I would have a different set of strategies or a different set of types. I'm like, oh, this is a particular type of strategy. This is another type of strategy. So that's a very particular semantic set that I want to have. And you can't please both of those sets of people at once, or at least it's very challenging to do that, right? And it's this absolute point about a set of restricted things that teaches people how to do something versus for power users an open and flexible tool that they can use and build on. And the genius is building something which can do the two things at once. Right, I ought to let you go. I need to go as well, but
Here we have Ask AI.
yeah,
You can edit everything, right? But one of them is enter question
yeah, okay,
on the fly, right? I could imagine what you're talking about being, you can obviously ideally pre-save different kinds of colors
yeah,
slash meanings,
yeah.
but also while you're highlighting selects,
Mm.
you just type what it is, and then that is available in the future. These
Yeah,
are really interesting questions, so thank you for highlighting them.
but also, when you're working in other spaces, for example, those if you have a set of known annotation types, you can then use those, right? And you treat them differently. Whereas if you have a kind of just a totally open set of anything, then you lose that power. Again, it's about building something which is extensible and if you're adding types over here, then in this other place where you have behavior which does something with those types, you can add new behavior, right? It's that kind of thing. I have to say, I really like the idea of spaces. I think that's a really nice way of going. And I wouldn't be worried about losing all these other opportunities. I would just push that and say, what can we do, right? What would make sense in this space? And I think you're already really making massive progress into how we might make XR into a real working environment. Right? Yeah.
I hope
Right.
to have a summit with you and the team at a suitable non-Monday evening time.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I'm also aware that obviously Dini is a very different time zone than us. So yeah,
Yeah, no, it's sometimes a problem, but we're now in a kind of a gleeful phase.
yeah,
No, it's really, there's a lot of wow,
yeah,
what's possible. And Fabien doesn't always agree with me. He is French, but he does fantastic work and he's very, very self-motivated.
yeah. It's
So
great.
we get all kinds of things, and then we have to argue whether we should keep him or not. Those are all good. Yeah,
I hope that was useful. I hope it was a good conversation and what you wanted.
it was way beyond what I wanted. I'm very, very grateful. Yeah, I'll put this up. I'll do a bit of some AI stuff on our chat as well.
Yep.
And, keep pushing. Look forward to seeing you in the Southampton area at some point soon.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right.
Cheers, Fred. Speak to
Take
you
care.
soon.
Thanks
Right.
again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.